Good day, glorious human life that is our viewer and listener, both. It's me again, Alexander, and
Lori, over here.
Yeah, over there. And today we're diving into a very bizarre, intricate, exciting, mind-boggling, expansive topic of the levels of self. Because last episode of our podcast, The Whole Middle Path, if you haven't listened to the last episode, please do. We started briefly going into these interesting layers of self-perception, right? Of different layers of body and energetic self, and how it all communicates with each other, and how it all creates our life experience. And some of this stuff is still blowing up my mind, because it's hard. Those things are, I find they're a bit difficult to talk about, right? Because they're less tangible as the physical body, you know. They're less observant in a way with the tools that we have in this world, but somehow they still exist. How like, what are those things, and how did we even get to the place as a humanity? Because I assume we're going to touch on different cultures that explored those concepts, that they came together and like, oh yeah, this totally exists, the chakras, the fields, the layers, you know, and it kind of works together. How?
Isn't that a great, like, why, who, what, when, how? Mind blown. You know, energy anatomy has always existed. So, I mean, again, talking about, as you said, we're going to talk about cultures, we're going to talk about how they use this. One of the things that it files back to, or kind of flows back into, is proprioception, or the ability for us to use our intangible intuition and awareness. There it is. Awareness of the world around us. And so, you know, you can be told by veterinary science that dogs see in infrared heat, or so that their colors are different and things like that. Well, we have that ability as well, but in our world, with the constant barrage of sensory input, we've shut a lot of it down. And that is a defense mechanism. I mean, you would have to, if you went out every day, seeing every aura, having all of that sound coming to you, smells, tastes, everything around you coming at you continuously, you would go insane. So instead, we start to tune it out, shut it down, not use it, until it becomes something that our brain doesn't recognize anymore. So a lot of this has to do with the mind. It has to, and that, of course, you know, when you're thinking of things like manifesting and other things like that, they say the mind is a powerful thing. It's a really powerful thing. It's also a really powerful defensive thing for us. And so we can talk a little about that later, but just to say that we all have the ability to see this, to be able to understand it. We just don't use it because it's too overwhelming in our world. And think about those cultures way back 10,000 years ago, where they were already depicting these things in images. It was simpler. There was a lot less information overload. You were in a very pure world where you had very little actual overstimulation, if overstimulation. You know, you lived very simply. And so you had a lot of space to use your other senses.
So people were overstimulated with this stuff rather than like computers and
there you go.
Information and all sorts of.
You know, I guess you really had to know. You couldn't go look somebody up on Facebook. So if a new person moved into the neighborhood, you had to trust your intuition. You had to trust what you saw with them. You had to trust whether they had that light in their eyes or the darkness in their eyes. And you had to use those senses in a different way. Now we just Google it, look them up on Facebook, you know, get a criminal record check. We have turned a lot of our proprioception over to our AI, over to electronics and devices and methods that are stored somewhere so that we don't have to pay attention to them all the time, but they're there when we need them.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess considering all of that as, all right, we come to the place that it exists, right? But how does that applicable in our lives? Because there are people who go through their entire lives not knowing a single thing about this, and they live smooth, happy, joyous existence. They're just very focused on kind of their own journey, and it all works out. Some people spend lifetime studying all of that, and it seems like some of them cannot even find a piece of the day in and centering themselves, or always seeking for something, always just striving somewhere, up and down the layers that are so fine, in their perception and the sensitivity that one has to develop within your own body to be able to pick up on those things. Do we need it?
So do we need it? Why is it important? In some cases, you might not need it. In some cases, ignorance is bliss. How is your life developing? Are you living a life that is content and happy, and you just mowing along, doing your thing, and you're quite happy to do so, and really don't need to understand anything about the mechanics of how your energy works or anything like that? Perfect. Great. I think less and less people are living that life. And they're finding that they are becoming wrapped up in their own illnesses. They're becoming wrapped up in their own awareness. They're becoming wrapped up in the information overload, and they're not sure how to shut it down. But by maybe understanding a little bit about it, you can learn a little bit more about how to find that ignorance is bliss, how to find that peace, right? So it's important to note, if you are going through some struggles and you're really, really confused and you've been told there's nothing wrong with you, it's all in your head, and you can't seem to heal, you can't seem to get over something, it's important for you to know why. Because otherwise you can't step over that hurdle and get to that place you want to be. But I think on the day-to-day basis, when you get so involved in what is the energy of this and how does this work for me, and you throw yourself into what I call a delusional world where you're all of a sudden trying to place something somewhere. Right? And because it doesn't quite fit in that puzzle, now you've got to go further, you've got to go deeper, or nothing ever fits, it's not right. In that case, we talked about that a little bit, trying to find yourself by always running away, running towards something else. And I think maybe at that point where you're getting so deep in that it's overwhelming you, it's time to sit back quietly and go silent and just stay in the moment and say, what does it all matter anyway? And just start to reattach back to the ground. Because maybe you're a little bit too up in the upper chakras. Maybe you're too mental. Maybe you're too much. And too much of anything is too much. So balance really does come between both. And I think what you'll find also is if you go into cultures where people are just moving along at a very even pace and their lives are simple, they're also very spiritual. So there's a balance between that. But the spirituality isn't one of seeking, it's one of knowing. And so there's that balance between the fact that you go through your earthly day in a certain way, and your spiritual is just taken care of because you know it's there. And you don't fight it. You don't have to know more because you just, well, it's there.
And for many of them, I like that you saying that in a way it's a shift of perception, I guess, of our own attitudes towards how we perceive ourselves and our relation to the world. But you've also mentioned, right? If you stuck in a certain level that, you know, we are physical bodies.
Yeah.
This is the most tangible reality that we can perceive through our bodily senses, right? The five basic senses that we know of, and it's real, right? As real as it gets. So I've definitely danced with myself many times where, you know, you just get into your head and emotional space, and those things, right? Those thoughts, the imagination, the feelings, they can feel so real, and they can pull you away from the actual reality of things too. And then weird, borderline delusional things can happen in life where, you know, I was reading my environment, I was picking up information completely wrong, right? Because I had this illusion in my head that I spun out of the control, and that just completely tore me off of my feet, right? And disconnected me from this body. And, you know, I thought the chain of events is going one way, but it wasn't. It was going completely opposite direction, right? But in my head, it all made sense, because all the symbols, all the signs, all the teachings, all the, you know, so... but to understand more the dynamic of those things, maybe let's actually submerge, or, you know, bring us onto the journey of naming what are the commonly known layers of self and existence of life in a human experience.
Cool. That's great. Yeah, it's I hear what you're saying about that illusionary mind. The power of the illusionary mind is incredible. And that is a delusional mind. Like it is misleading in so many ways, and it can take us down so many paths that aren't healthy for us. Do note that a lot of what we're talking about here has, you know, philosophical, spiritual, energetic perspectives that are different. What we're talking about here is the anatomy of energy. And so presenting it, we just have certain things that exist within our energetic being. They don't just exist separately from us. They are all tied into our own body. And we can get, you know, into that a little more in another episode, how each one of these layers that we're going to go through today actually has points on the body that we can access, and we can literally change or shift the chi and the energy within those points to give more balance to this. But having said that, we want to know where we're at. And I think a lot of people understand what's called the chakric system. Or chakras. You may not know everything about chakras, but you've probably heard about chakras or chakras, or however they are pronounced in whatever area or region that you are looking at them in. Most people who have had a yoga class, you know, they will talk about your root chakra and staying grounded and making sure that you develop that chakra. And then if you've gone into any level of manifestation, they're going to talk about your heart chakra, and they're going to talk about your solar plexus chakra and how those goals are met through different aspects of your being. Your chakras are really fueled by what we take into our bodies, how we think, how we feel. So they have a lot of different levels. And each aspect of those levels affect the chakras. But the main 7 are powerhouses. They literally work with the negative and positive charges in our body. They work with the electrofiring of the nerves and neurons. And they send a lot of information, both up and down. So the root chakra is the first one. It's the base one there, the red one. And that energy travels between the earth and our perineum, or our reproductive center. It's where we call the primordial energy of life. And it's in our reproductive center that we start to reproduce in terms of children. There is what they call the primordial soup, or the beginning of cellular structure. And it is the most tied into our physical being. So if the root chakra is imbalanced, there is usually a poor response between our physical world, our emotional world, and our mental world. And what happens there is we begin every day when we get up with an imbalance that does not allow us to assimilate well. It does not give us a strong bonding with our culture or our family or our identity. And it creates for us a physical distancing from our spiritual being.
Yeah.
So the root chakra is for us, like you said, we're in these dense bodies. We live on this plane. These bodies are what is important to us because you get one. You don't get another one. It's not a Freaky Friday thing where you leave and you're in another person's body. You get that one body, and it's an important thing. But if your root chakra is not in balance, or it's not open and receiving and fine-tuning energy, your physical body cannot manifest itself. It cannot function properly. So the root chakra is very important. And like they say in yoga, grounding, sitting, putting roots down into the earth, attaching to the earth. And I would say even more than that, getting out in the earth, identifying with the plants around you, identifying with even taking 5 seconds a day to stop and look around you and take in the air as you breathe. Take in the feeling of the trees around you. Take in the feelings of those things. 5 seconds a day is going to help your root chakra. Just, stop and take a look at the mountains. And just let them be part of you. That's kind of an interesting thing.
Well, with that, if I may kind of bring into the root, I'm very much in love with the indigenous view of things, where it's not the land of the people, it's people that come off the land, right? Because inevitably this is made out of soil, as much as we want to glorify it as, an art of life, of human evolution, but it's particles that came from food, from soil, and slowly building upon itself, expanding, growing further, and it will go back to soil eventually too. So we are inherently connected to this plane, to the earth, right? And especially if we consume more of the foods of the local environments, and we go out, we put our feet into the local microbiomes and bacterial life, we just connect so much deeper and we communicate. And I've definitely noticed within myself how profound that grounding experience can be when you allow that mindfulness and that perception. It can be just information. It was before when you just taught me that, but when I started implementing and I started noticing in my own practice, I go like, it does feel better. I feel stronger. I feel healthier. My legs, I can feel my legs more, because before my legs exist, but I cannot fully engage my muscles, if you know what I'm talking about. They're almost there, but they're sort of disconnected. But since I started working on my root and grounding, I can even feel my legs better. I can flex the muscles better. It's very interesting the way it works.
And I work with a lot of people that aren't grounded, a lot of people that aren't in their bodies. Sometimes it can be identified quite easily. You go for a massage and the only time you can ever feel it is when it hurts. So it's always go deeper, go deeper, go deeper. And that is one of the first signs of disconnection from your root, disconnection from your own body. If you think about, say, even a horse, you've got a huge animal that is powerful and muscular. And when you go to treat a horse, they can feel a mosquito land on them. And if you push on them too hard, they kick you. Because excuse me, that's way too much. And so something that big, that thick, that muscular, responding more to energy work than it does to deep pressure is interesting to me. How when we get people who are smaller, like you say, you can't feel your legs, that's just that disconnection from the earthiness, from the root, from the flesh, from the bone, which are the most dense parts of our being and do represent our root chakra. And again, going back to what you said about an indigenous culture, we are born of the earth. We are children of the earth. And, you know, the earth is the mother. We come and from all of the cornucopia of minerals and cells and biomes that form together to become what we are, as is in the yin and the yang. You know, you separate the yin off and then you have the yang, the sun and the moon, and the changes of the energy come together to make the 10,000s of things that all revolve into being.
Yeah.
And so that yin culture, that's really important for us to build a strong foundation in, to build a foundation with our roots, to build a foundation with our, so to speak, our mother, the earth itself. And I also find it interesting because you look at our world now and we're bouncing from one country to another. People aren't necessarily in their homeland.
Yeah.
And we find a lot of dissonance in identity with people, not identifying. And maybe some of that can be alleviated by doing what you're doing, spending more time in the nature of the place that you are, to identify with it, to harmonize with it, to create a better cellular presence with it.
Yeah.
And that can be really helpful. So grounding, earthing, hiking, you know, get out on a paddleboard, have some fun in the water, really feel what it feels like for your muscles to be pulling that paddle, and find some awareness in your own flesh as you start to do things, going hiking. Feel trees. You know, trees are great. They're so wonderful, but just close your eyes and wrap your hands around a tree and start feeling it. And the next thing you know, you're almost communicating.
Well, very recently, I finally was able to perceive breathing on a tree, which was very surreal sensation, you know, where I was tuned in, so just working with a tree, doing some Reiki exchanges, and I could just physically feel the tree slowly just pulse and expand and contract. So, you know, in my perception, I guess, however my brain wants to understand it, it's breathing, but for the trees, the circulation of water movement, for the intake, outtake of carbon dioxide and oxygen and all sorts of goodness. But you just felt so, you know, that level of intelligence of this magnificent being that is also a living creature that has its own personal dimension of existence, you know. But if I allow it to, because I am no different, I have different molecule structure in a way, but you know, the atoms that bind us, we're all carbon-based life, we're all water-based life, so we do function on very similar premises. And you know, listening to that definitely helped me out with the rooting as well, where I just feel so much more connected, grounded, and aware. When I walk into the forest, I no longer am surrounded by trees, I'm surrounded by living beings that are just standing there and doing their own life cycle, you know.
And they're really good at grounding and rooting.
They are.
They're excellent at grounding and rooting.
They probably have less going in their heads, which we get to, eh?
That's right. And you know, the three base chakras, the root, and then we'll get to the sacral and the solar plexus. But the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus really do involve us in this world. They involve us in the energy around us. Like you said, when you go in and you're working with a tree and you start to feel that pulse, you're feeling the pulse of the earth itself, of something that is so completely in tune with its environment that it pulses with the change of the environment around it. The earth itself breathes. So when you really root deep, and you're in that place, you will start to feel yourself move with the pulse of the earth. And you'll start to feel yourself join with that. And I would say for people, you know, if you can find that and just do that for a little while each week, it is so calming, it is so healing, and it does allow all of your cells and your emotions, your mental aspects, and your physical aspects to realign. So rooting is a wonderful way to begin to move the energy up the chakras. Partly because if you think about it, we're attaching to the earth, but that earth energy has to move upward. Okay. And the only way that we can develop upward chakras is to have a strong, healthy upward root movement. So if you're going to start with any energy medicine at all, you need to start with the root. Okay. You have to. If the root is not healthy, nothing else will be healthy. If you start developing your spirituality and you pay no attention to your connection with the living world and the living being that you are, you'll get what they call a Kundalini sickness, and it doesn't allow you to stabilize your nervous system. So you'll get a lot of nervous system disorders.
And what is Kundalini? Just so
Kundalini
our viewer knows.
Here we go.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different words for the energy within us. A lot of different words for spirit, self, soul, internal energy. Kundalini is a living energy within you. Chi is a living energy within you. Those words, even though they come from different cultures, chi in the Oriental culture, Kundalini in the Indo culture. So you've got these words that literally represent the living physical energy within us. And the chakras each take from either chi or prana or Kundalini, and they pull energy from those into us to funnel and fuel our different aspects of being, whether it be the physical body, a reproduction of cells, or whether it be the emotional body and the way we regulate any kinds of feelings, or the mental body where the mind itself needs nourishment in order to process thoughts and actions.
All right.
So you get that kind of energy, and that energy begins in nourishment. It begins in what we take into our bodies, the way we connect to the earth around us, and then it raises upwards through each chakra. And each chakra is actually attached to a set of glands in our body, in the endocrine system, which is our information highway. That endocrine system and each one of those chakras has a separate purpose in the physical body. And they also have a purpose in the emotional body. They have a purpose in the mental body. So when you have an imbalance of hormones, lots of people can identify with that monthly. You have an imbalance of emotions. And those come from glands. Those glands are in the root chakra and the sacral chakra. And those are the two areas where we balance out our emotional and physical state. So chakras themselves are inherent powerhouses that function for each aspect of our body. And they are important aspects for us to look at when we go into healing, when we go into working with changes that we want to achieve.
Well, and I believe in yogic traditions, right? There are about 112 or 114 chakras in total that are being sort of recognized, that 112 are within our body and 2 out of our body, which we probably will come to it. What does it mean in our body or outside our body, where, you know, those 112, if you're really an avid aspiring yogi and a seeker, and you really connect to each individual kind of representation of your own energy interaction with the world, and you can work them separately to achieve that a coherent integrity, right? And to take your life whichever direction you feel like you need to go. But the 2 of them are out of our control, it seems like.
We have a few that are external to us, and they attach us. One is our Earth Star chakra that is at the feet, below our well springs, which are, I can show you this, the well springs are right here at the bottom of your feet. They attach you to the earth. So the more often that you can breathe through those, the better. But they attach to what's called an Earth Star. The Earth Star is our connection to the molecular structure from which we come. Then you have, as we go up through the chakras, let's just go up through the chakras. Our sacral chakra is our identity on this earth. So it is how we fit in culturally. In some ways, it is our self-identification. And it is the start of us becoming an independent being. And then we have our solar plexus right in the middle. The solar plexus is the powerhouse that functions our digestive system. It also functions our goals. So what we intake to meet something else. It will define our personality structure as to whether we're driven or laid back or however we have a fundamental personality structure. And it can be sped up a little bit or slowed down a little bit depending on what we need to do. Then we have our heart. Our heart sits up in the chest, right over the heart. And this is an area where emotions develop. The heart and the root are balancing the body. So we have to develop physically to develop emotionally. And once the emotions begin to develop, the heart will bring out our qualitative, compassionate aspects of being. So that we can have emotions, so that we can fall in love, or we can get angry, or we can do all kinds of things. And these are all natural things for us. The next is our throat. Our throat is our center of truth, and it is the first chakra that connects us to our spirit. It's the first chakra that comes out of the body and into the etheric being. So where we have the self-identity down in the sacral chakra, that's the orange one, it relates to our truth of being, or the path that we're on, in our throat chakra. So it helps to connect our physical personality to our etheric goal of personality. The next we have is our third eye. Third eye sits at the brain, and it's about our wisdom. It's about our growth in mental thought and attitude. And if our throat chakra is imbalanced, our mental thoughts will be imbalanced, because the throat chakra is the truth of our identity. And so when you were getting really mixed up, thinking, okay, well, this is how I see the world, and this doesn't seem to be working for me, you weren't sitting in the truth of the identity. And by that, I mean, you weren't really out of your own identity. You were seeing the world through a shade of glasses. And so you weren't seeing the reality as it related to you. You were seeing the perception as it related to you. And with that, we cannot gain clear thinking, because we aren't actually able. Our bodies are kind of interesting. They take in information and they decide whether that information is pure or impure. And then our small intestines, will go into elements later, separate the turbid from the clear. When the sacral chakra isn't working, because the throat chakra isn't working, the small intestines aren't working, so the turbid and the clear never separate. So then we have a very turbid view of the world, and therefore we can't raise that energy any higher. We can't find wisdom. We can't find, even at that point, I think meditation's very difficult. It makes you really antsy. It makes you jumpy, because the third eye can't connect to the sacral and the solar plexus because it's being blocked. And then we get up to the crown. And if they're all healthy underneath, the crown will explode, and we will have a really good, clear perception, not only of the world, but ourselves. We will also have a really good, clear perception when the world and ourselves are not balanced. And we start to know inherently something is wrong.
Yeah.
right? So sometimes you will hear people say that, and this is the crown enacting in all of their chakras. They'll say, I don't know what it is, but I know something's wrong. And I need to find out what it is because I'm not in that centered, balanced place, and it's causing me a lot of distraction or destruction. And the crown chakra, if you get the root plus the sacral plus the solar plexus plus the heart plus the throat and plus the third eye plus the crown all working together, you get infinite awareness. And that's called enlightenment. So it's kind of like a mathematical equation, right? If you want to get infinite awareness, you got to have all these things plussing together properly.
But it also seems to me that it's not like a kind of a, it can be a linear progression, but some of the things that resonate are, it's like a chicken and the egg problem, you know, where
what comes first?
Yeah, what comes first? Like, hey, I'm
Where's the
working
imbalance?
on my root, but how do I know what to work on my root when, you know, your crown's already working and it's already downloading information and nudging you through your intuitive, through your emotional senses, through your thoughts, when you have the sixth sense that something is wrong, something is not working out, I'm just feeling anxious, I'm worried, you know, where there is always, it's like a chain that is a closed loop in many of ways.
It's a circle.
Yeah, but so every piece of chain has to work in a way coherently with each other at the same time, and then you can improve every link, right? While you go at it, and you just keep improving links almost separately, maybe all together if you're really an avid practitioner of some sorts. But I find it's exciting too, because sometimes, you know, you told us too that healing begins from down up,
The head down, the inside out,
inside outside, right? But with this one, we started with the root, like we're starting down below, moving upwards. But at the same time, the root's not gonna change until you also open your head. You know, you start kind of incorporating the wisdoms that, or the information, well, the stuff that you're listening. If you don't put it and apply it into your own lives.
You know, there's your connection between heaven and earth, right? Healing starts from the head down. So this brings us into the bodies that we actually live in. So chakras, a lot of people tend to think that the auras are the chakras. They are not. The auras are actually the energetic doubles to the physical existence that exponentially grow out from the body and feed energy into every single chakra. So auras are a little different than chakras themselves. Chakras are actually the most physical part of our energetic system attached to us. They literally attach just in front of the spine. There's one that goes out the back and one that goes out the front, and they're like these circular cones, and they literally attach into our internal system. So, you know, a lot of people think, oh, this is just hokey, right? But have you ever gone along somewhere and the hair stands up on your arms and the back of your neck, and in your gut, you know something is wrong? That is a chakra picking up energy. Your root and sacral chakras together make what's called your base chakra, and it's your survival chakra. And where does that feeling hit you? When you're walking along and then your hair stands up on end and it's right in here. That's your base chakra. That's your survival chakra actually triggering. So that's a proprioceptor. So animals use it all the time. People, we're overburdened with too much information, so we've shut them down. So a lot of times what we'll do is the brain, healing starts from the head down, the brain says, just forget it. There's nothing going on. You're being silly. Our brain is the best gaslighter that we have ever seen. And it's because we have disassociated from our auras. We've disassociated from our energetic system. So what I mean when I say healing happens from the head down, you know how your brain just convinced you there was nothing going on? if you can't get your brain on board with what's going on in your body, and you can't get your brain to open up and communicate with your body, you will never heal. All healing begins in the mind. All of it. If you believe something very truly, that's what will happen.
I'd like to add on that, actually. Brings up to mind this beautiful teaching from, again, yogic culture, that the one is very close to me in my personal experience. Mr. Sadhguru says that, we put so much emphasis onto our brains, where in our human evolution, it's a fairly new tool, it's like a fresh device that took some time to develop to its capacity right now. And it's like new phone, we're so obsessed with it, and we're trying to figure out and do everything with the brain now. But regarding to tools and human body intelligence and life intelligence itself, brain is like a knife, or it's like a flathead screwdriver. You cannot undo like a nut with a flathead screwdriver, or you cannot stitch clothes back together with a knife. Like you just can't. Right. It's a different tool. And I think with us, because it's a powerful device, and as you said, right, you can will many things if you have your thoughts, if you have your brain, just keep the direction and keeping the strong focus in your life. Your entire body will just operate so much more coherent, right? It's the kind of mother lode of our nervous system in a way. But at the same time, disregarding that every cell in our being, every cell and every organism that lives in our being, like in the guts, the gut microbiome,
has its own brain.
They have their own capacity to perceive intelligence, like trees do, like plants, like animals do, right? It's different to our brain, but the magnitude of it is nowhere near less, if not more in different cases. Like it's a better tool for different tasks. As you said, hey, if you're picking up with your chakra, if you're feeling like, whoa, I shouldn't go into this forest at this time of the year because I'm just feeling like I shouldn't. Maybe there's a cougar in there, and your primal instincts, the cell in your body, because your brain logically, it's like, oh, everything looks okay.
I don't see anything.
I don't see anything. I don't smell anything. But your cells, they're like, they just like, oh, I've been through this journey many times. The genetic memory within all of that, it's like, hey, cautious.
That's, and that's a really interesting thing, because your body has its own intelligence. Your cells each have their own little brain. Each system in your body has its own intelligence, its own little brain, its own function. We have an autonomic nervous system. We don't literally have to think about breathing. We do not have to think about digesting. It happens. So our body has an incredible intelligence, and a lot of times we don't listen to our body because we have a deadline. We have something going on. And we're not working from our crown chakra in this case. We're not even working from our third eye. We're not working from our throat or our heart. We're working from our solar plexus.
Survival.
No, we're not even in survival at that point. We're in goals. Goals mean everything. And when the solar plexus takes over completely, the solar plexus basically denies the body its existence. The only thing that matters is the goal, the golden ring, the ticket, the whatever it is. That's the only thing that matters. And it will use our brain. So the solar plexus is opposite on the color scale, goes neutral with the third eye. The third eye runs our brain. So the solar plexus, if it is excess, takes over the thoughts of the brain. And the third eye, which is our wisdom, takes a back seat. So we don't actually have a functional way of separating out what's good or bad for us at that point, because the solar plexus is doing the thinking. It's an interesting thing once you start to learn how the chakras work with each other. This isn't something that's kind of etheric and outside us. This is actually how we function.
Yeah.
And when we're functioning on this wonderful scale of awareness, our brain and our body are communicating all the time. Our brain is aware of our body is aware of our brain. And they both communicate very well. Once that solar plexus kind of cuts us in half, the brain kind of goes off on its own. It's doing its own little journey. And unless we can actually convince the brain to come back to the body, the body can't heal. So that's why I always taught healing starts from the top down. We have to involve our brain, we have to involve our head in our journey, in reality, without that colored perception, without the yellowness of those glasses saying, you know, that doesn't matter. I'll rest tomorrow. I'll rest when I'm dead. I've heard that a lot. I'll rest when I'm dead.
Well, and the certain modalities are healing, specifically like hypnotherapies, right? Yeah. The affirmative kind of modalities. Louise Hay, for example, you know, is a huge example. All over the world, people know her works and reading her books, How to Heal Yourself through affirmations and reprogramming your own brain, where, you know, magnificent and sort of miraculous cases of people healing, you know, cancers and just detrimental illnesses, degenerative illnesses, just like that. But just because their brain, as you know, people call it a placebo effect. I call it the effect of faith too, right? When you have strong determination and your belief system allows, and it's so deeply rooted into the clarity of it, right? When your deep structures coherently understand that information that you feed right now through the sentence, like, I am healthy, you know, and nothing, there are no other shades that screening this information to be delivered to the rest of your body. You're healthy and you're always going to be healthy.
Oh boy, did you just open up the window. I tell you, you did. Because this whole system is programmed to function. This whole system, we are programmed to heal. And the thing about it is, we deprogram our own healing when this system is out of balance. And you've opened up this whole window, because when I say that, you say, I am healthy. Sounds can affect energy. So, you know, go with a group of animals every once in a while and sing them sad songs. They'll come up and cry at you because they take the pureness of sound. You play heavy metal rock around a group of animals and they'll, you know, monkeys, and they'll all start swinging from the trees and going wild because it's instigating their primal aspects. And that's when you look at what is happening with mantra or chanting or something like that, you are actually creating an energy resonance that is speaking to one of these levels. So the more that you can do it, the more you will affect what's happening here. And we haven't even gotten, again, to the bodies that we live within. Like, this is just this tiny little 7. And there are 7 major chakras. They are fundamentally our structure. And then there are the minor chakras, and they are at each joint in your body. And they are the things that react to the internal and external balance between us. So why do so many people have joint issues? Well, start looking at the internal and external balance of this world right now. We live in a really stressful world. We live in a world that is full of delusion, and I look out sometimes and I go, this is just crazy. This is just nuts. Everybody's blaming everybody else for things. And you know what the truth is? You know, I've been reading these posts. I try and stay out of politics. I try and stay out of things. And I read posts and I just, you're kidding me, right? You've got people saying, well, Trudeau's responsible for this and Trump is responsible for this. And I'm looking at them going, neither one of them is responsible for anything. We're living in a world that things are happening in. And these people simply are sitting in a place where they are trying to drive something towards their own solar plexus goals.
Yeah.
And when you have people that have imbalanced solar plexuses that want to be kings of the world, that is their purpose, that is their drive. But they're not responsible for the world itself. The world itself simply is. The reality is, this is happening. It's not the responsibility of any one person.
Yes.
It's not the responsibility of any one group. The fact that COVID happened, it's not the responsibility of Trudeau or Trump or anyone else. And the results of that are not their responsibility either. It is natural, evolutionary things that are happening to us that we experience. And it is our reaction to them that creates the outcome.
I feel like that might be a little heavy for some people to be okay with, but I think it's a really good kind of a medicinal spoon of maybe a little bittersweet, you know, but because we've especially seeing, you know, the C word that you've mentioned it already, but during that year, you know, it was a thing. And there was tons of beautiful events that happened all around the world because of that thing with the human society, and tons of really negative events that happened as well. So in a way, defining your own personal experience, you know, the experience of your immediate community and then the global scale experience. But I find sometimes we're so narrow-minded and focused on our goals that we do not allow ourselves to expand and sense into us inherently being interconnected species, right? Where, you know, oh, my flights got canceled. I cannot go to my favorite cafe, you know, like I have to wear a mask everywhere. Or, you know, this and this doesn't go my way, where my goals are undermined. And then it's so easy to find, like, where does the blame come from, or the guilt, or the distorted emotion that tries to find that one person responsible for a thing that just is, you know.
Good old solar plexus.
Where does it come from in the scale of this graph? Like, how do we learn to recognize when patterns like that happen within ourselves?
I think when we start to look outside ourselves for those things that are ruining everything around us, we also need to take a step back and break it down. And again, remember we talked earlier about that process of reaction. We are built to react. So it is survivalist. That base chakra has to react. That reaction sends information to our solar plexus. Our solar plexus weighs it out, the turbid and the clear. Does this fit with my goals, or does this not fit with my goals? And if it doesn't fit with my goals, how do I make it fit with my goals? So I can either externalize it, blame everything else, be in a delusion that I am a victim of everything and have no power, or I can sit with it for a minute and say, what is the reality? I can start to awareness. I can look at it and I can say, well, what is the reality of this? I mean, the reality is that people are making decisions. Those decisions are happening. They're making them because of something. I'm not saying that people can't influence what's happening in the world. I'm saying they're not the be all and end all of what's happening in the world. I think in so many ways, things happen on a cycle, just as you said. So the world cycles through these levels on a regular basis. If I sit with awareness and I say, where am I in this cycle? I am at solar plexus. Solar plexus is blocked in this cycle. What happens when I get to heart? Like if I were to bring some heart energy into this, by the way, the energy comes down as well as goes up.
Yes.
If I were to bring some heart energy, what would I be bringing to that? I would be bringing intuition and compassion. Aha, okay, so why is this happening? We go into investigation. Investigation lets us see things in a different way. It lets us see many different sides of things and realize that they're all real, they're all valid, but they don't have to be singular. We can have many different routes and many different ways through things. And then we get to what's called non-identification. Non-identification is where we get to see the bigger picture. We get to see that something isn't always right or wrong or black or white, that there are many shades in between. And I wouldn't even say those shades are gray. I would say they're colored. They're colored based on whether they're in a physical survival way, they're red. If they're in an emotional way, they're green. If they're in a mental way, they're blue. If they're in an intuitional compassionate, they're yellow. If they're in our will spirit, they're orange. If they're in our soul, they're indigo. And if they're in our divine being, they're violet.
A whole
so
rainbow.
We're not seeing, when you get to non-identification, you don't see in black and white and gray, you see in all the different colors. And where it does go gray is where it's blocked. And you go, okay, well, this is really interesting. If we could teach people to begin to de-escalate the mind, de-escalate the knocking illusion of the mind, and move into the awareness of each level and cycle, people would spend a little more time looking at things before they reacted, before they took that reaction and followed through with it. So what I say to people is, you're always going to react. I react big time to things. I am a real A-type personality, so my reaction can be quite big. And then I have to sit with myself and go, why the reaction? What is the reaction for? The more I can do that, the more I can come back to my center. The less I can do that, the more I will get tilted off. Now let's go back just a little bit more. Remember when you said, I am healthy, I am healthy, I am healthy? Look at the messages we're throwing out there right now. And that is a little heavy, but look at the messages we are continually throwing out there right now. We're listening to them, we're posting them, we're believing them, they are becoming our truth.
And it's a food, right? It's like any tangible source of food that we eat that, you know, the good nutrients get into your body and help us to rebuild our cells. The bad nutrients either don't do anything or cause detriment, right, to the already existing cells, further poisoning them and causing decay and collapse. Same with ideas, right? Same with sounds, emotions that we invoke onto ourselves on a daily basis. That also is being digested. Everything is, right?
Absolutely. And when the solar plexus and the sacral aren't working very well, the turbid and the clear become pretty muddied. And they become part of our being. And then we have a lot of things going on in our societies right now. And I don't think it's just North America. I think it's all over the world, because we are inundated with these messages. We are inundated with this constant verbal mantras of how we should think, how we should feel, what is happening in our world. You've got this belief being thrown at you over and over, and this belief being thrown at you over and over. And we're losing our ability to separate that turbid and that clear. We're losing our ability to see reality. And so are our bodies. So our bodies are reacting. They're reacting with stress factors. We have mental illness, addiction. We have astronomical numbers of children with arthritis, asthma. So
and the small intestinal issues,
small intestinal,
very
digestive
prominent,
issues.
very prominent in my
Don't
practice. I say every second person that comes in, if not like every 3/4 person who comes
Crohn's,
in.
colitis, IBS. They are
nonsense.
rampant, and there is all this stuff that is stuck, turbid and undigestible, and tearing us apart from the inside. And so, what do we do about that? Ooh, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Well, we're going to get going on that later, aren't we?
Probably, yes.
But I think in the meantime, if you start to understand that this is a cycle, it's actually not linear, it's round. I really love the yin and the yang and the elemental symbols for that, because they show us that cycles always happen.
Have you heard this recent discovery? There was a photo of elements, like the basic structure of I don't know, like an atom or whatever, like on an energy exchange, you know, and
Yeah.
it actually looks like the photo looks like the yin yang symbol.
It
you know?
does,
Like
because
the quantum realm of things, you
Yeah.
know. It's very
Yeah.
interesting how people came up, right? Because they
I think
say,
they just inherently knew it.
but life, that's the thing, right? There is nothing new that can be invented in life.
No, there isn't.
There is only there are things that can be discovered by new technology,
Yeah.
the new ways of looking and seeing things.
Yeah.
Because life, it's magnificent, and the depth of it is so intense, you know,
Yeah.
and you can just go through layers and layers and it never ends, you know,
Yeah.
and it builds upon each other. It goes inside out, it's swirling around and doing all those things, where I think it's a very, very good thing to allow ourselves to really to understand there's nothing to chase. There's nothing new to try to make up, but there is all this just insatiably infinite pool of things, of information, of wisdom,
Yeah.
of knowledge, that if you just connect to it, it becomes available.
It is.
Yeah.
And, you know, we think about ourselves as evolving towards something. We came from origin. When we first started out as beings, we came from origin. We were at the closest point, at that point, to knowing it all.
I used to be
Because
stardust at some point.
We came from origin. So these systems that originated, they were systems of knowing. They weren't systems that people discovered. They came down from thousands and thousands of years ago, when we already understood, because we were at our closest point of origin. And the further we get away from that point of origin, the more we're trying to figure out why, how, what. I want to intelligence it. I don't want to know it.
Yeah.
Or so we want to understand it rather than inherently know it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Look at all the fun we're having. Look at the things that we've created. This is an exploration, and it can be a lot of fun, but it can also be very, very overwhelming and imbalancing. Because if we don't balance between heaven and earth, then chaos ensues.
Well, today we very much touched up, we brushed on the concept of chakras and a little bit on the auric and ethereal bodies and how they connect and interconnect. But I feel like we definitely need another episode to...
We just dipped our toe.
Yeah, we just did
into
like
the
a
ocean.
Blink, blink, blink.
Blink, blink.
We're definitely going to have quite a bit more information coming through, particularities with each chakra, with every density of human existence in the auric fields, and how to work with those, and what can be done when physical ailments are felt that can be connected to those energy centers, and how a person can help oneself through just realizing what's going on through the awareness, right? Because infinite awareness is infinite possibilities. It's a business 101. So
there you go. I
but
think we also, touched on one thing that I think we will be developing as a train of thought, and that is the idea of that linear route as opposed to the circular route. Because I think that one idea in and of itself delineates the difference between Western scientific and Eastern holistic.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say Eastern as that it's only in the East. Every culture has it. What I'm saying is the two opposite ends of the scale, right?
The labels that we
You've
put
got
on
where
it.
the sun comes up, and then you've got where the sun goes down. And in between, you've got this grand arc that is continuing on in a circle around the world. And what we tend to think of is it goes straight across, and it doesn't actually do that. The interesting thing for me is that East meets West. The sun rises in the East. It's the origin of our being.
Yeah.
It goes down in the West. It's where our being is evolving towards in knowledge and understanding. And that's the science of our being. So there's the origin of our being and then the science of our being. And when I think about East meeting West, I think about the two of them coming together.
But it's also that
between.
chicken and egg, right? Where sun is not rising nor setting. It's the earth that spins
right.
around, right? So the sun is just doing its own
Well, if it's
thing.
setting in our west, it's rising in somebody else's east, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's what I mean by it's not a linear thing. It doesn't just go across the sky and stop. It starts over again. And that's part of, you know, the whole view that we have. So when you have those two views together, what you find is one starts where the other stops. And where one stops, the other starts.
Yeah.
So it's not a separate thing. It's an interdependent, cohesive relationship.
Yeah.
That when both of them come together, that you create a whole.
Well, I find myself personally on, I think, I'm around the heart journey right now, with where I'm at in life, and I find, yet again, as you said, right, bringing all of those energy centers into coherent workflow, and when the energy flows between them, it just takes so much pressure and weight off other energy centers needing to overperform or underperform because one of them's pulling too much or not giving enough, where you know. And yet again, it's for surely it's a belief structure that I do practice myself, and I work on it diligently and mindfully, where, you know, my heart these days, goals that I set, I'm very strongly, you know, tuning into my heart space too. Like, does it feel right? Do I feel excited and passionate about it? You know, do I have survival fears that, oh, if I give into my excitement, that I won't have enough money to pay my bills, for example, and do those things, right? Where I, for sure, and it's never-ending process where things, the questions, the fears, the emotions, they're always going to be arising, right? But the way, as you say, like, you react to everything. But then you have this time, you catch yourself and like, okay, why did I react? Why this thought appeared? Is it my reality, or is it just, you know, my mind playing tricks on me, or I'm just sensing things that are not quite real at the same time? Or am I shaping my own response in this like victimhood mentality, right? Oh, nothing goes my way, or like I don't have any power. I have no say in how I perceive everything around me. And I find, life's been getting fun, like really cool in a way where I just trust that, if I'm acting and moving smoothly and I'm allowing my other energy centers, you know, my passion, my heart to take over sometimes and to help my goals to form and shape. And then things are just working out where I don't have to stress, you know, and be constantly overthinking of like, oh, the amount of money that I'm earning, the amount of food that I have on my table, you know, and other ambitions and goals that I have to suffice and levels to achieve of being like a human being, you know, in our societal norms. But also trusting that through that enough, I can be a better part of my social standards, you know. I can offer more time in volunteering expressions. I can have more time pursuing things like this, where you know, I'm strongly pushed and encouraged to have that information expressed, to share your pool of knowledge and wisdom with our viewers too, where it just, I think life becomes better when we realize that we are just not one dimension of being, but we're many dimensions existing all at the same time, doing their own thing, and having a conversation with each other always. That's a nice takeaway. You know, because once we start to get into these bodies, what we realize is we're all connected. And the development from our connection can be positive, it can be negative, but it is an evolution. And that takeaway that,
You know, you're constantly in a dialogue, and that dialogue is teaching you. And ultimately, that dialogue is teaching the collective. The dialogue is teaching the oneness about experience. And we are all experiencing those things and growing in them. And that's where we open our third eye, because that's where we gain our wisdom, and we start to inherently be able to see how some of those things that we've been through are actually the catalyst that brings us to where we need to be. As hard as they can be. You know, it's we live in a human world. The human world's pretty hard. And if you can create something for yourself that makes it a little less excruciating, because it can be, you know, it can be an excruciating place to be on a world where you feel deeply, where you have intense pain, where you have intense things. And it's kind of nice to know that you can take control of that. And in some ways. We'll talk about the will spirit on one other.
Well, and I feel to give a little bit of a cliffhanger, you know, to give you, I mean, to leave today with a little bit of something for you to look forward in the next couple of weeks with the next episode, where we're going to be expanding and continuing more on that, but also, just putting some things together where, you know, the unfairness of life sometimes, where, you know, it's also a hard pill to swallow sometimes. It's like a little child, you know, born into circumstances that are not quite, I guess...
You're not just opening windows, you're crashing down doors.
Supportive of that soul's journey in the way of empowerment, of choosing, you know. Boom, you know, we have war going on in different places on this planet right now, and when things happen to souls that supposedly maybe they're consciously haven't chosen, you know, what kind of way of life they want to be living, but how and why it's happening in the grand perspective of life experience, not as just a personal human individual experience, but the whole conscientiousness, the collective, the evolution of self, and how it helps. Because life, you know, identity of life is like air. It's everywhere, and it's uniformal, you know. But once it's separated into its individual little bubbles, and it has this illusion of
there's a reality to it.
Of reality,
There's a bump into the wall and hurt yourself.
But how these bubbles interact with each other, I think that's going to be a fun something for the next.
Well, philosophy of so many things, you know, philosophy in so many cultures and whatnot has tried to deal with that over centuries and centuries. And they've come up with a lot of different things. You know, there's Buddhism, and then you've got your Taoism, and you've got a lot of our religions are trying to deal with that. They're trying to work out.
Well, even like shamanic expressions, the most primal, I guess, right?
Exist.
Why does?
But we're going to leave that. You know, it is part of this growth. It is part of this cycle. And it is part of us moving up towards wisdom, towards the ability of non-identification. And I think if you can take away anything from understanding that there is an energetic system outside of who you are as a physical being, one takeaway would be that if that physical being is ever going to be comfortable, if it's ever going to really excel at its best level, you probably have to look at that energetic system and make sure it's balancing as well.
Beautiful. I think we're gonna wrap it up with this beautiful piece of wisdom today, and definitely stay tuned for the next episode and a further expansion of this.
Again, all I can say is, he just blew it wide open.
Well,
There's so much to.
We're not messing around here.
We're not messing around anymore.
The whole middle path that just brings everything all together for you, the viewer, to receive this information, to make your own conclusions, to apply it to your life however you deem fit, and hopefully to make your own decisions and to be empowered to make your own change and create the life, at least reflect on the life that you have with a full sense of awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll just have that moment where it makes sense and you can start moving forward.
No promises. We're not, there's no promises. But
I think sometimes when you look a little more into it, you start to go, oh, that makes sense. And then, that's that moment of clarity we're all looking for.
It does come through. So, but on that note, if you'd like to connect with us a bit more, definitely subscribe and like this video, show some interaction in the comment section. We'd love to hear and see what you have to say. Maybe share your personal experience with us. That would be fun, and for the other viewers to read and reflect upon, because that's the beauty of us doing life together, is sharing our experience. So stay connected, and if you'd like to see more of what I'm doing, you can find me mostly on Instagram at Owl Nest Stories.
And you can find me at our Live Better, Live Longer page at Eastern Arts on Facebook. If you want to leave us some comments, or I think that's great. The only way that we start to realize that we're not alone is sharing things with others. And that we're quite happy to share.
Life is the best when it's shared, I think. Yeah. It's a wisdom from, what was this? It was a book originally, actually, a true story of a guy who went to Alaska and then just died there, unfortunately, in the bus. He got poisoned, like into the wilderness or something like that. But in his final notes, in his notebook, he did write that life is the best when it's shared, because you can experience all sorts of beauty and experience in life, but there's no one to tell it about. Then it's like, all right, I guess.
That's a really nice note to end on. Thanks for coming today, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.